The Russell Brand situation has just got so much worse. Back in 2023, allegations surfaced against Russell Brand of SA, but now he has been officially charged with these things, which means that he will have to face court. And off the back of that, it's looking a little bit messy. For the full legal breakdown, go and check out the Simply Crime YouTube channel. But I'm going to talk about, what we can kind of expect from this situation and what we've seen so far. So, as of right now, Russell Brand has been charged with multiple sexual offences following an investigation by the Metropolitan Police in London, and the charges announced on April 4th, 2025 include 1 count of rape, 1 count of indecent assault, 1 count of oral rape, and 2 counts of sexual assault. Now, these charges span from 1999 to 2005, which is a bit of a change in timeline from the 2023 allegations, which, the timeline was between the early 2000s and 2006. So, there is a ever so slight shift, but it's taken place. Now, with regards to this, one woman claims that she was raped by Brand in Bournemouth, a town on the south of England, in 1999. Another woman alleges that she was indecently assaulted in London in 2001. A third woman reports that she was orally raped and sexually assaulted in London in 2004. And the fourth woman states that she was sexually assaulted in London between 2004 and 2005. Now, the investigation began in September 2023 when the first allegations came forwards. After a joint report by the Sunday Times, The Times and Channel 4 dispatches highlighted the accusations of sexual misconduct against Brand. Now, you may remember back when those allegations first came out, the fallout was quite significant. YouTube completely demonetized him, his gigs dried up, and he was dropped by a hell of a lot of brands. Of course, at that point, they were just allegations, but with the weight of them, the CPS and the Metropolitan Police must believe that they have something of substantial weight, because they are willing to push it to the Crown Prosecution Court, which means that obviously he's going to be strapping in for one hell of a tough time. Now, after the accusations were lodged against him, or not even accusations at that point, and now that the charges have officially been lodged against him, he had this to state over on his social medias, where he said this.
Hello. Firstly, thank you for these incredible and overwhelming messages of support. We're very fortunate in a way to live in a time where there's so little trust in the British government. We're very fortunate, I suppose, that this is happening at a time where we know that the law has become a kind of weapon to be used against people, institutions, and sometimes entire nations that will not accept and tolerate levels of corruption that are unprecedented. I'm speaking particularly to those of you that are watching this in the UK. How do you feel about your legal system right now? How do you feel about some of the high-profile cases that are not being pursued and prosecuted? How do you feel that the Southport murders were handled? How do you feel about the government of Keir Starmer? Now, that's just sort of general context. I've always told you guys that when I was young and single, before I had my wife and family, we're just out of shot over there, my beautiful children, I was a fool, man. I was a fool before I lived in the light of the Lord. I was a drug addict, a sex addict, and an imbecile. But what I never was a rapist. I've never engaged in non-consensual activity. I pray that you can see that by looking in my eyes. I want to thank all of you for your continuing support. I want to let you know that our show will be on Rumble on Monday. Thanks for your support there. And of course, I'm now going to have the opportunity to defend these charges in court, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. In the meantime, you lot, stay free. And we will be continuing to discuss this matter.
So as you can see there, obviously, completely denies all allegations against him once again, and states that he's actually looking forward to going to court to try and defend himself. A lot of people have seen this and stated that it is just, diversion tactics. He's kind of pointing the finger back at the government, who he blames to be a victim of. He's said many a time that he feels like he's just a victim against, of the government, and that this is some kind of overarching scandal against him. Now, you're probably wondering, could he potentially be convicted now that he's been charged, right? What could possibly happen? Well, as of right now, he has got a dates lined up for May 2nd of 2025. That will be the initial preliminary court hearing in Magistrates Court. Russell Brand himself does not actually have to be there for that, right? He can send lawyers on his behalf because it's just a preliminary hearing and they will enter a plea. Now, based off of that video alone, we can imagine it's going to be a not guilty plea, which means that it will have to then escalate because the Magistrates Court deals with more minor crimes and it's the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, that will handle more major things. And obviously these are some very major charges that have been lodged against him, which means that obviously, you know, it will mean that he'll have to be extradited back from the US where he's currently living. But there is an agreement between the US and the UK, which means that, you know, it's quite a simple process. But, you know, it still has to go through the courts for that to happen. So he'll have to be extradited back over to the UK to face courts, you know, in person. But obviously the verdict or the, you know, the idea or the consensus is that, you know, the CPS or the Metropolitan Police wouldn't have done this if they didn't have potential grounds to get this guy, okay? But, you know, based off the information available at this current time, it's really tough to say whether Russell Brand could be convicted. This is going to be a very, very long trial, regardless of what happens if he says not guilty, which we can imagine he probably will. But as of right now, obviously, you know, he's being charged with all of these things, and the fact that the charges have been filed mean that the police and prosecutors think that there's a case worth pursuing, you know, which typically requires reasonable prospect of conviction under the UK law. The allegations span multiple incidents and accusers, which could potentially strengthen the prosecution's case if the evidence is consistent and credible. However, Brand has strongly denied obviously absolutely everything, insisting that his relationships were all completely consensual, and his defense will likely challenge the accuser's account and supporting evidence. Now, we can imagine we've seen with cases like this, you know, the questions will be, why did you wait until now for this to happen? Or to, you know, push charges? Why have you waited? Why is, you know, how can you prove that this wasn't consensual? Because obviously, you know, the DNA evidence will be gone by this point. And, you know, the records tend to fade as well by this point. So it will heavily hinge on the accounts and the consistency of those accounts to make sure that they all corroborate and make sense in terms of a timeline. You know, it's really hard. You know, it will also depend on the quality of eyewitness testimonies, corroborating evidence like texts, diaries, witnesses, all the rest of it. That's what will be the divisive part of this case. And those things can be very, very hard to come by. So ultimately, this whole thing is up in the air. But what is for certain is that if he goes in with a non-guilty plea, this is going to span a very, very long time. What do you guys make of this, though? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. While you're down there, jump to get the hell out of that like button, subscribe if you're new, and until next time, I'll speak to you later. Peace.